Water, earth, fire, wood, metal. These 5 elements lived in harmony until one day, fire suggested they play Paizo's new board game Elemental Stones, and the battle for supremacy began. Oh dear. Oh my god. Oh my gosh. This video was brought to you by Elemental Stones. Thanks Paizo for the complimentary copy. The goal of the game is to score the most points. The main way you get points during the game is by scoring pattern cards. You'll have some number of pattern cards in your hand. The board looks like this and will have some number of elemental stones on the board depending on what has happened during the game. There will also be some elemental stones in the edge zones, but these will always be sorted into their correct zones. If the board has a pattern of elemental stones that matches a pattern on one of your pattern cards in any rotation, you can score it. Ka-ching! And you get to put it in your little ka-ching pile. And at the end of the game, you'll add up all these numbers in the corner from all the pattern cards in your ka-ching pile. Once you score your pattern card, ka-ching, the card is locked in and you will get those points at the end of the game, even if the pattern changes on the board. You can also use an air stone as a wild stone. If you do that, you need to replace it with the stone you use from the edge zone and put the air stone back on the side of the board with the rest of the air stones. When it's your turn, you have 3 actions, and it costs 1 action to score a pattern card. Ka-ching! So in theory, if you have 3 pattern cards in your hand, you could score 3 pattern cards on your turn if you can successfully match them all to the board. But that is unlikely. More likely, you'll need to use your actions to manipulate the stones on the board to match your pattern cards, and you can use your other actions to manipulate the stones. Then you can spend one of your remaining actions to score your pattern card and get the points. You'll have a little pile of stones next to you. You can spend an action to put as many stones as you want of a single element on the board. They must be contiguous, and at least one stone must be connected to the other stones on the board. But as long as you have the stones, you can place as many as you want of the same element. Otherwise, you need to spend another action. So if you had this pattern card, you could spend an action to place some wood stones like this, and then spend another action to place some fire stones like this. Then use your final action to score, ka-ching, your pattern card. As you can imagine, again, air stones are wild stones, so you can play them as if they were any other stone, as long as you have them. You only have to swap them if you block in a pattern card. If you score a pattern card, and it has this plus air stone on it, then you get an air stone. Woohoo! The other way you can manipulate the board is through transmutation. You can swap stones with adjacent stones on the elemental wheel. You can use an action to swap a single stone on the board with an adjacent stone on the elemental wheel, pulling it from its corresponding edge zone and putting the desired stone in. Or you can replace all the stones in your hand with an adjacent stone from its edge zone, but only if there are enough stones in the edge zone. Otherwise, you'll mess up the stone economy. So you can try to score your pattern cards if they match a pattern on the board. If they don't, you can play your own stones or swap stones on the board to try and get a pattern with your 3 actions. It's important to score your pattern cards because any pattern cards left in your hand at the end of the game get this number of points subtracted from your score, so get rid of them. You can also spend one of your precious 3 actions to discard a pattern card if you don't think you can score it. You put it in the pattern card discard pile, which is next to the pattern card deck. There will also be a common river next to the pattern card deck. You can also spend an action to draw a pattern card from the common river, or an unknown card from the top of the pattern card deck. You can only draw 1 pattern card per turn, unlike the other actions which you can do as much as you want and in any order. These actions are written on your cheat card in front of you. Now you know how to play, but there's still one more twist. At the beginning of the game, you draw an elemental sovereign and an objective. This is your secret mission. You're not just playing a fun pattern matching game, you are secretly battling the other elements for supremacy. I got 5 points for this pattern, and I added 4 metal stones to the board, destroying Earth in the process. These points get scored at the very end of the game. You can see how many points you get for your objective, so it might give you just as many as the pattern cards. Some of the objectives score points on a table, so every objective that you meet gives you more and more points. While the pattern cards get locked in when you score them, your objective could be ruined at the last moment during play. Each elemental stone can only be used once for each objective. The other way to get points is based on the element in the corner of the pattern cards. At the end of the game, each pattern card that was scored with your element, even if it was scored by another player, gives you points based on this table. The first couple only give you a couple points, but they add up fast and exponentially. You also get 1 point if you have the most of any given element. These points could be a tiebreaker, but they're much less than the points from your objective or the pattern cards. The instructions for scoring at the end of the game are on the back of your cheat sheet card. Play pattern cards, secretly meet your objective, play pattern cards of your element, and gather as many stones as possible. All these will help you win the game. So how do you get the game actually going, and how do we jumpstart the stone economy? This is how the game board should look when you start. There should be one of each stone in this inner circle, but in a random orientation and order. Then draw 12 or 10 random stones depending on the number of players and place them in their edge zone. Each player starts with 2 random elemental stones, and they draw 5 pattern cards, but choose only 2 to start with. You draw 2 objective cards and choose 1. You draw an elemental sovereign, then figure out the end condition. The game ends when one player has scored a certain number of pattern cards, and it depends on the number of players. Keep track so you know. The game occurs in rounds. One round is when every player takes their turn and uses their 3 actions. At the top of the round, take a number of piles of stones and place them in the common area. The number is the number of players plus 1. Also, put a number of pattern cards equal to the number of players plus 1 and put it in the common river. The first player to go gets the starting player card. It's the person who boiled water last. When it's your turn, you can take one of the piles of stones for free, and once everyone has gone, the remaining pile of stones get distributed to the edge zones and the pattern cards go in the discard pile, the same place you put your discarded cards. Then the starting player card goes to the person to the left, and they go first at the top of the next round. So if you went first last round, you'll probably go last the next round. So it's not like any other game where you just go continuously from one player to the next. Every player goes in a round, then you say stop, give the starting player card to the left, and then restart. The game ends when one player has scored a certain number of pattern cards, but when they do that, you always complete the round. Then the game officially ends.
One last thing, if you're playing with only 2 players, don't use this outermost ring.